Michael, it's an honest pleasure to have you on the podcast. Mike Jones is general partner at Science Inc., the venture fund behind the $1.3 billion in exits, including Dollar Shave Club and an early backer in brands like Liquid Death, Rover, and Scopely, with over $6 billion in combined exits. Formerly CEO of Myspace and AOL youngest SVP, he now serves on the board of Liquid Death, Mammoth Media, Pray.com, and Mindset Care. Mike has a front row seat to three forces shaping modern brands: AI driven self reflection, chaos partnerships that spark culture, cult followings, and TikTok shops rise as a make or break D2C channel. Mike, first of all, you do a lot. So I want to just first dive into your mindset. Why, first of all, how do you jump from so many different industries and companies, and why do you think that's the case?
Well, let's see. I mean, I overall kind of focus on building things that people love, so kind of mass consumer products, services, and experiences. So even though the industry might be different, like it's a Dollar Shave Club, or it's video game company Scopely, or it's Liquid Death beverage business, at the end of the day, it's good. It's good things that I'm doing with fun people, and we're building cool products for cool customers. So for me, it feels like we're doing the same thing. I'm just serving people with good products and experiences that make their lives better, and whatever we're serving them at the time might be a little different than last thing, but the customer's the same.
Yeah. Would you say though there's a part to you that's never satisfied? Like you're always, it's like you're doing one thing and you're like, "Hey, I need to do something bigger," and you're constantly
Mm.
chasing something.
I think entrepreneurs are always chasing that next big high, or the next big deal, or the next big like sequence. So certainly I don't feel satisfied. And certainly I'm looking for the next big thing that keeps me motivated and excited. But yeah, so yeah, you're right. Like I'm always chasing the next thing.
Yeah, and I wonder through your various startups, if you can tell me a little bit how your mindset has been carved and shaped as you traverse through experience from going from one company to another.
I mean, my mindset changes a little bit on maybe a few levels. One is like looking at the deals and looking at the industries you're going after, and are they getting bigger and bigger? So am I taking on bigger bets? The second is maybe on thinking about how I work with management and how I work with CEOs to bring out the best in them so they can kind of realize their dreams and build with their vision they're going after. Third is there's a whole pathway around execution. How can I speed up things, take learnings we've had in previous businesses, talent strategies from the previous businesses, and put them in new ones to make the timeline quicker and execution faster. And then maybe there's a fourth one that's a little more intangible, of like, am I having fun? Like, do I like thinking about this problem? Do I like thinking about this product? Are people enjoying it? Do I feel connected to it? So it's maybe different levels, but yeah, I mean, I'm always trying to evolve that process and my thought process around it, become more efficient, find bigger outcomes, more exciting, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So from your early days with MySpace, I kind of want to get
Hmm.
your input on how the landscape has changed over time from Web 2.0 to like just the very beginning of social media to where we are today with blockchain, Web 3. First of all, like how do you how do you feel that has been being on this journey from Web 2 to Web 3, and where do you think this is all going?
Well, I think like, yeah, if Web 1 was pretty static, Web 2 became about like social, like interacting, like instead of the website, just me alone, now I'm interacting with others, which is super fun. Um, Web 3 is all this new stuff, right? It's the decentralization, it's data ownership, it's new ways of, giving ownership and agency to individuals, and maybe even like AI's Web 3, or maybe it's AI's Web 4, like what it means to like not only connect with people, to have agency, and then also to like have your own, AI components to it. But it gets better and better, bigger and bigger. I think there are certain sobering facts of understanding the impact of humanity on what social media has done and what it is doing. And so there's a piece of the sobering reality of this new connected world we've done, whether that's government destabilization or power to the people, or whether it's social media and mental health crisis, right? So there's one side of it. The other side of it is, what is it to live in a super connected world with all this data and feedback coming to you in regards to your health and your mental health and how you interact with others and your fitness plans and finding communities and connectivity. So good news, bad news, probably across the whole thing. Overall, obviously, I believe it's fundamentally good and fundamentally good for society. But there's a nice point of reflection I think any of us can have right now, looking over this time period. I just turned 50, so it's like I grew up at a time where it was like skateboarding, punk rock, and this kind of like grunge feeling into like the beginning of the personal PC, into the beginning of the web. Then you bring in their cell phones, mobile phones, blockchain, data, AI. I mean, an incredible amount has happened, in my lifetime, just in the progress of technology. And we're within years now of like robotics in the home, right? Self-driving. I
Yeah.
mean, what an incredible time to be alive and see this progression. Overall technology, I think, has helped society in so many different ways. But I think it's an amazing time right now to be alive and experience all this.
Yeah, we're really at the forefront of three massive industries: quantum computing, crypto slash blockchain, and AI. And it's feel like just one of these industries in and of themselves is enough to just greatly supersede something like the Industrial Revolution. Uh, do you have like a dystopian view on where this is going? Do you have a positive outlook? How do you feel like life is going to be in 10, 15 years from now with our predictive power is just really fleeting. We have no idea where this is going and it's advancing so quickly.
I mean, I think 10, 15 from now, it's going to be I think the introduction of humanoid robots into society is major. Like, that's kind of unbelievable. The introduction of AI as the separate entity that you connect with on lots of levels, of whether it's deeply personal, deeply professional, that's absolutely happening. And that's like an incredible also, transition and change. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think the reality is like 15 years from now, society may not look the way it looks today, right? I mean, how old is the
Yeah.
iPhone? When did the iPhone come out? Is that 20 years ago?
I think it's about 20 years. I think that's about right. And isn't
Yeah.
it amazing how it's like it was the coolest thing. You're able to put MP3 files on it. And now it's like, by the way, it plays music. It does literally everything else.
Yeah.
And I think that period of time of growth is going to become radically less. Like what we've done in 20 years with the iPhone would be something like, just GPT's releasing updates every few weeks. And like, we're no longer dealing in the time frame of like decades and years. We're talking weeks and months. And it's like so hard to know where all this is going.
Yeah, I agree. And it's changing super fast. Yeah, iPhone was 2007. So it's like we're just rounding that time period. Um, so yeah, 15 years from now is a hard thing to imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It really, really is. How do you think the role of a founder has changed over time? I mean,
I mean, founders are founders. Like, I think that maybe now it's like the tools are different. So, a founder today with use of AI is going to be a little bit of a different approach than the founder of yesterday. Maybe management becomes a little bit different. Maybe obviously staffing is looked at super different. Right
right.
now, the earliest, youngest founders I'm working with are having the fastest progression because they're the fastest to pick up new tools and to find ways to do stuff versus throwing humans at it. So, but the founders are always founders, right? You're like, in my mind, like our best teams have always been this mix of a visionary founder paired with an operational founder, and that combined together ends up being like a super beautiful combination.
Yeah. And tell me about your journey with investments and what do you particularly like to focus on? And as an investor, like, would you have any markers or advice for someone who's looking to do investment as well in this just fast changing industry of what you necessarily like, what maybe what you look for, what you look to
Yeah.
avoid? Yeah, stuff like that.
I mean, we look at obviously each investor is going to have a different theory, different sector they want to spend time in, and different time frame and risk profile of their investment, right? I'm looking at the most volatile, the highest potential risk level, which is venture investing with new startups. I'm looking at long time frames, so 5 to 10 years of realization for that company to become something big, and I'm looking for things that become billion to multi billions in value, right? So
Mm,
it's kind of max risk dialed up with typically only equity, very little debt or leverage used to kind of grow that value, right? Um, but every investor has to find the area that they want to focus in on. It's hard to get started investing if you don't have capital. It's obviously a lot easier if you're starting with capital so you can invest. And I started as an investor because I had my own capital to invest and I invested in a lot of startups and started learning what that felt like. It takes time to learn this. It takes pain. You have to go through the ups and
yeah.
downs of it. You have to commit to a process on it. But there's so many different flavors of it. I mean, I can't even imagine the number of different flavors we could come across on what investing means broadly. But people have to specialize in a certain area, and it might take them a few years to, it might take them 20 years to get great at it. But for me, it's very rewarding, not because of the capital side, but really because of the human side. On the venture side, you're backing people's dreams and then you're supporting them through their journeys. So for me, it's about the transformation of seeing somebody become something or build something and be a part of that journey and feeling like I'm a part of that journey that actually gets me excited. The capital and return component is also exciting, but the human component is really what drives me, you know?
Yeah. So, how did you carve that risk appetite for taking like early stage startups and high risk investments?
I mean, the way I got into it was just it's what I knew. So it's like I was in LA. I had sold my first company essentially to AOL and and basically then basically I became this person that you could come and speak to if you're building a technology company and you want to know the process of raising money and selling a business. And so I met with a lot of early stage entrepreneurs in LA that were looking for that type of advice and structure. And in doing that, I began investing or being an advisor and picking up equity positions inside those businesses. And then that kind of like brought me into the path of investing, right? So it was
Oh,
really more about sharing my knowledge and time, that made it work versus like a formal introduction to it.
yeah. Michael, do you think we're in an AI bubble right now?
Well, I think the impact of AI might be understated, to be honest, and maybe the current valuations on the AI leaders might be overstated. So it
Okay.
just depends. Like if you ask me, are we in a bubble relative to the way that AI is going to transform all of our individual lives? No, I think we're probably understating how that's going to impact us. Whether OpenAI or Anthropic or any of these monster companies are worth the numbers that they're promoting on their primary and secondary share transfers. Like I can't state to that. Like, but I definitely know that from a day-to-day perspective, a future workforce perspective, everything. I think AI is going to be the most revolutionary thing we've ever seen.
Yeah. And someone who's, built a little bit of capital and they're looking to take on some risk and make some investments, what would be like the number one piece of advice you'd give to them? And what industries might you be looking at to say, hey, this is a good area that I might want to look into?
Well, if you assume that, like, let's assume somebody has 80% of their capital in something conservative that they felt comfortable with, and they have 20% that they want to put into a risk bucket. And in that risk bucket, for me, it's going to be, highly volatile things that could have greater than a market return by hopefully a strong standard deviation. And so I don't know what can do that, right? Like, so I had somebody the other day say, "Hey, Mike, like, if I wanted to have the most aggressive potential 3x of my money within like a year with liquidity, what would I touch?" It's like you're kind of like crypto penny stocks, right? Like hyper liquid. If someone came to me and said, "How could I get a 10 to 100x of my money within a 10-year period?" It's probably startups, right? Like it's betting across a portfolio of startups. But the reality is, nobody, including myself, can pick the one. So the reality is you have to pick the 10, you have to pick the six, right? And you have to hope that one, two, three, four of them become, mega exits for you. If you're lucky, you'll get one. If you're really, really lucky, maybe you get 3 out of 10. But, I think if you're going to invest in the startups, you can't invest in the startup. You need to invest in the startups, right? You need to build a bundle, and you could become a specialist at stage, sector, industry. You could also become a specialist at just evaluating founders, right? And how you think their vision is going to progress. And hopefully you're coming to it with some form of knowledge of your industry, your expertise that gives you some edge. But if you're looking for that outsized, mega return bucket, startups are pretty much the only thing I think that can push that. But it comes with obviously a substantial amount of risk and a substantial amount of time.
What characteristics do you look for? What characteristics do you look for when you're speaking with founders? Like, what's the kind of founder you would hope to say, hey, this is the kind of person I'd be happy investing in?
I mean, assuming I'm checking all the boxes with like industry and approach and et cetera, I'd say like one component of it is that you need founders that both have really deep conviction, and a certain stubbornness and drive and vision on whatever mission they're going after, mixed with their humbleness, knowing that they should learn from others and steal knowledge from other people to make their success their own and achieve their success, right? So what that means to me is like some of the best founders I've been are also the most curious, and they're there to win, and they are totally comfortable if by winning it also means they have to get knowledge from other people and steal that knowledge. Some of the worst founders I've been with is they really want to win and they don't have any interest in getting help from anyone else. They're just going to do it their own.
Mhm.
And what they don't realize is that's a major handicap because although, yeah, everyone believes they're like self-founded and they did it themselves, the reality is all these things they're going after, especially if you're going after big missions, there's a lot of knowledge in the world that people will be free to give you that will actually help you along that mission. And just because someone else gives
Yeah.
you that knowledge doesn't mean that you're any less or less of a founder or less successful. So, I mean, some of the best, and I'm talking about founders I have some time with that have multi-billion dollar startups that they've done themselves. They are very curious, and when they meet with me or they meet with people like me, they come in to learn things. They come in to steal tactics, steal secrets, steal knowledge, and apply that to their goal. The more stubborn founders that come in that are like, I got this, I don't need your advice, and just here for money.
Yeah.
Frankly, like I've seen very little success of that.
The thing about people sometimes is they look really good on paper, and you really get to know someone in their extreme conditions. When things are really stressful, when things are really complicated,
Mhm.
that's when a person's character really comes out. And
Mm.
sometimes that's hard to know. It's like in the early stages, especially someone's, speaking with you, trying to make an impression, they're all just very, I would say, formal. Michael, my question to
Yeah.
you was, it's really hard to know who someone really is when they're formal, and you really get to know a personality when people are at their extremes, either angry,
Yes.
stressed, and that can be something really hard to vet on paper or even with an initial meeting. Do you have any like litmus tests or like weird stuff you do to filter out to say, hey, this is the kind of person I would love to invest in?
I'll tell you, it's really hard. I mean, like, certainly there's components that I find more in dialogue on people, but I wrote recently this codex called Human Architecture. I published it for free. It's called humanarchitecture.ai. And one of the goals is to kind of understand people's kind of personality traits. And one thing I actually find the hardest to understand is basically, do people have self-belief or not? So like one of the problems that I think is
Mm,
that like you might see somebody's resumes, you might have a great conversation, but in a certain sense, when we're investing into somebody, we're investing in their self-belief, right? That they actually are going to go out there and win and they believe themselves that they deserve to be successful. They're not going to self-sabotage. They are going to be, they have these big visions, et cetera. And so I found it really hard to determine that. You are definitely right that in stressful situations, you determine how people really react. It's kind of like the statement of like, you don't know anyone's a really good leader until they're in a position where they really have to lead. Because like,
mhm.
there's presidents we have that are doing great peacetime and they might be a great leader, but maybe they can't step up and lead. But then you have presidents during very difficult times that suddenly in the country can step up and do something epic and they can show themselves as a great leader. So you're right. You have to see people in extreme conditions. For me, that's a less of a problem. The bigger problem is understanding whether somebody fundamentally believes they deserve success. Like, to be totally candid, like that's been the most hardest thing for me to like evaluate on individuals is, do they actually
W-
deserve the success they're going after?
What do you mean by that? If they
What I
believe
mean
they
is like,
deserve.
yeah, like I have a statement that like I definitely think you get what you believe you deserve. So
Mhm.
if you really believe that you're an incredible person, you deserve success, you'll probably find success. I find a lot of people say, I really want to be successful. I really want to build this company. But in their heart, they don't really believe that they're going to be successful doing it. And they have a lot of self-doubt. And so they might go to others or they might go to investors or something to kind of cure that self-doubt. But inherently, they actually doubt their ability to be successful or their worth of being successful, whether it's from the way that they were raised or the way their parents handled them or their childhood or whatever sequences they have. But if somebody, you find that like winners win more and people with small wins can build those wings to really big wins. But there's a lot of people that have lost a lot and they have a hard time switching into a winner mentality and they might not actually believe they can win. So a big piece of this is understanding, do you believe that you can win and do you believe you deserve to win? And do you have something inside you that might stop that from happening almost energetically? And so that's a big piece of what I try to evaluate when I'm with people.
That's so interesting because, like, I would imagine an investor cares about team dynamics, intelligence, just a unique business model, and to know to have like your primary focus to be whether someone believes in themselves. This sounds really deep. I mean,
Well,
and
think about this, like you can hire team management. We can hire, investor management, we can hire BD, we can hire great PhDs to do great things. We can hire people from Harvard and all this stuff. But if you have a founder that fundamentally doesn't believe they're valued themselves or their self-worth, or they don't believe to be wealthy. or they don't believe they should be wealthy, or they deserve to be wealthy, or that anyone deserves, or they don't believe that they themselves can be successful. In their heart of hearts, they're like, yeah, this is one more fuck up in a life of problems. Like, but even though they're trying to mask their way through it. So I think you have to look for people that
Right.
have that fundamental self-belief. And some of that comes from people failing a lot and believing like, oh, this next one's the one.
Mm,
This is going to be the one. And they really believe that's beautiful. It's also people having small wins and being like, I'm ready for a bigger win now. I can go for something bigger. So that some of it's
yeah.
building up of confidence, something's building up of experience. Sometimes I find that people see gravestones, not stepstones. Like they see a wake of failures and they see, I built a graveyard of failures. Other people look at those experiences and think, I have stepstones to my next level of success. Right. But that
Mm,
mentality, I think, has a bigger impact versus like the standard, skill set that you would look at a CEO.
yeah. It comes down to like how you deal with failure. Some people just it destroys them. Other people they leverage it to like catapult themselves further.
Totally agree.
And even it's like and it sounds like what you're describing is almost like blind confidence, like the Conor McGregor effect, where it's like you have all this vision of where you're going to be, and it's almost like you're so confident that other people feel it, and it's almost like you're manifesting like a self-fulfilling
I
prophecy.
100% believe that. I mean, and so it's like what I like to spend time with coaches to be like, okay, if you have an athlete that's very talented, but fundamentally don't think they're very good, what do you do? How do you change their mindset? Because I think coaches deal with this with athletes all the time, right? But I think it's a huge, huge question, which is like, are you with somebody as the CEO, somebody that really believes they deserve success? This is also why a lot of times you find that people that grow up rich stay rich because they fundamentally believe that that's just life. They're privileged and they grew up in a rich household, and so they just deserve to be rich, and that's just the way it is, and
Hmm.
that's just the way life works for them, and so they just have that belief structure. They never even doubt it, right? It's also why sometimes you believe that people that grow up in very difficult situations or poor situations or whatever economically challenged situations, they believe they just don't deserve it because that's just what they grew up with, and it's just really sad. And so, a big piece of
Hmm.
stepping into a startup is like you're driving off belief, right? Because there's nothing there and you see something, you're going to build something there. And as an investor, you have to believe that whatever you build is going to be very, very valuable because that's why we're investing. It has to be valuable, a ton of money. And by being major value, it means the CEO has to become really rich because the CEO becomes really, really wealthy. That means the company became very, very wealthy, which means the investors became very, very wealthy. But if the CEO doesn't believe that they deserve wealth, then it means that their company is thus not going to become very successful, which means that the investors are definitely not going to make a good return.
Right.
Right. So it's like that profit driving. This is off of, I'm not talking about nonprofits or people with mission driven or ESG or any of that kind of stuff. I'm just talking off of pure investing into companies that will return you a ton of money. Naturally, you have to believe that the CEO has to want to become wealthy
Right.
because in order to get a lot
Right.
of money, the company has to be worth a lot and they want to own a big piece of
Yeah.
the company.
Yeah. Or it can be like you're putting a puppy in a rainforest where it's like they were you're looking at me like, hey, where's this going?
Like, where's that going?
No, it's like when you grow up with a lot of wealth and you had a lot, like you didn't have to fight for anything, you didn't have to crawl your way up. Sometimes it is like putting a puppy in a rainforest where you put them in the wild and they don't have all those cushions and safety nets. It can be
That's
a
true.
little harder for them to survive.
It's true.
So someone
Yeah.
with coming from nothing, and you're right. Part of it is also like blind confidence, but sometimes someone with nothing is going to crawl their way up in life and build everything on their own. Those are the people that you could take everything away from them, and they're very possibly can rebuild it.
I've had people that like their only option was success. There was no net, there were no parents, there was no
Right.
trust fund. They had to make it work. They had to make payroll. They're just going to find a way to make it work. And that drove them. Right. And you're definitely right. I've also had people with a lot of family wealth and a lot of backup. And when the job got too hard, they just walked away because their belief was like,
Yeah.
you don't have to work this hard. And I have an option. I don't need to do this. I can do something else. I don't have to do this. This is too much
Right.
work. Right. So you're right. It hits people in different ways. Right. And so, yeah, and remember, these aren't like, it's not like, I mean, entrepreneurs are definitely proving something, right? They have a vision, but they're proving something. They're proving something to themselves. They're proving something to their parents. They're proving something to society, their peers, their schoolmates, whatever. Like they're not sitting there being perfectly balanced Zen individuals. Like they're driven off making something exist that doesn't exist because they feel a need for it. But they also want to be recognized for that success of it. And so you find that, you find people that are there to prove to themselves. So if you have somebody wealthy, they might be there to prove themselves to their family that they can also themselves create great wealth. And they want to prove it that they are as good as their parents. And that's their motivating factor. And I've seen a lot of very
Right.
wealthy people create a lot of mass wealth off that pure driven force of like, I'm proving to my family that I'm not just here just like to take the trust fund. I'm going to do it myself, right? And to your point, I've also had people that are like, "Look, I grew up with literally nothing. I have an opportunity here. There's no way I'm blowing it. I'm making this work. This is my step out of where I currently sit in society." They've also become very successful.
Right. It's not a luxury. So, success is not a luxury to some. It's a survival
Okay.
necessity.
Yeah, which I
So,
love that
Michael,
too.
looking back at your timeline, what would
Yeah.
you say was your biggest mistake, and what was your greatest lesson from it?
I mean, I don't often think of mistakes, because I don't like that mentality. I'd say like one of the lessons I've had is that if I believe that what I spend time on can become incredibly successful, and I can spend my time on something that's very small and become successful, but it's very small, or I can spend my time on something that can become very big, right? So my biggest lesson is making sure that if I said to myself, look, I'm going to spend time on some things and one or all of those things has become very successful, then what I have to ask myself is, am I spending time on things that I'll be happy with the size of success of those things?
Mm,
Right? Because I can spend my time building a local dry cleaner and make it the absolute best local dry cleaner, right? Or I could spend my time building a next generation media company that could become a globally dominated media company. So the challenge of myself is evaluating my time because we vote with our time, right? Every day you're voting with your time. What are you spending time on? You're putting that time into whatever buckets that you're spending time on, your work, your family, your girlfriend, your kids, whatever you're depositing your time. You're voting with your time every day. So I'd say, okay, my voting with my time on things that if they're successful, like I would anticipate them to be, they will be of the size and scale that will make me proud, right? And sometimes I find that I'm spending my time on things that naturally will be small, right? And
mm,
that's not going to give me the result I want, even though I'll be successful.
mm. Would you consider yourself a workaholic?
I probably don't like that term and I probably would never use it.
I'm asking.
What I'd probably say is I love what I do every day. You know, a lot of people might look at that and call it work, and I would just say I love what I do every day. It doesn't. It's not about work, right?
My follow-up question here is, I work a lot, right? And I
Sure.
absolutely agree with your answer. I love what I do. I do have a hard time separating my personal life from my work life.
Hmm.
Do you feel like you have that problem as well? And how do you navigate that? How do you kind of like stay productive and get as much as you can done? You love doing what you're doing, and then, wife or kids, and how do you navigate all of that at the same time?
I mean, I'm pretty good at cutting off at like 6 p.m. every night. I avoid work dinners because I just feel like 6 p.m. and on, that's kids, that's family, that's friends, that's girlfriend, that's wife, whatever it's going to be. That's personal time. Maybe it's working out, maybe it's cycling, but it's something that's not directly connected to what I do during the day. Um, so I typically don't engage on the weekends, right? So like
Mm,
I'll do emails all the time. I'm an inbox zero person all the time. I'm always clearing inbox. I'm always replying to Slack and text messages. I don't like open tasks. But with that said, I'm not taking meetings on the weekends. I'm avoiding traveling on the weekends. If I have to do a business trip, I'm gone as small amount of time as humanly possible to commit, the other portion of my time back to my family and my friends. So I've drawn some fine lines there, and I think they've effectively served me well because I have a great relationship with my kids and my girlfriend and my prior spouse. Like I always had good, relationships family wise. But I'm sure there's a bunch of people in business that are like, oh, Mike never goes out to our work dinners. Or he like never is at this like cool event happening at night. Cause I typically just don't. Like I'd much rather spend time, over here. So I drew some lines and that's been effective for me, but I'm pretty committed, certainly during the typical work hours. And I'm typically inbox zero kind of 24/7.
Michael, I appreciate your time and your wisdom.
Thanks for having me on.